You know what's crazy? How everyone expects you to just throw away all common sense the moment you get engaged. Like, suddenly you're supposed to pretend divorce isn't a real possibility that happens to half of all marriages. Well, I wasn't about to be one of those naive women who ends up with nothing when things go sideways. Anyway, make sure to hit that like button if you enjoy hearing these kinds of stories, and don't forget to subscribe if you're new here. I'm Marisa, and at 30, I thought I had it all figured out. Brandon and I had been together for 4 years, engaged for 8 months, and we'd finally found our dream house. The same house I'd been pinning on Pinterest for over a year, obsessing over every detail from the marble countertops to the walk-in closets. Brandon had just put in an offer, and I was practically bouncing off the walls with excitement. We were sitting at Cafe Luna, our usual spot downtown, when I decided it was time to have the conversation. I'd been thinking about it for weeks, and I knew Brandon would understand. He was always so logical about everything, always planning ahead. That's what I loved about him. Well, one of the things, anyway. So I've been thinking, I said, swirling my wine glass, watching the red liquid catch the candlelight. About living arrangements after the wedding. Brandon looked up from cutting his steak. Yeah, the seller countered our offer. I think if we go up another $50,000, the house is ours. I took a deep breath. This was it. That's great, but I've decided to keep my apartment. He paused mid-chew. As a rental property, No, just to keep. For me. The confusion on his face was almost comical. I don't follow. I leaned forward, speaking slowly, like I was explaining something obvious to a child. Look, statistics show that a lot of marriages don't work out. I'm being practical here. I'll keep paying rent on my place just in case things don't work out between us. It's smart planning. Brandon set down his fork and knife carefully. Just in case. Don't take it personally, I said quickly. It's like insurance. You have car insurance, but you don't plan to crash, right? He nodded slowly, and I could see the wheels turning in his head. Right, smart thinking. Relief flooded through me. I knew he'd get it. I knew you'd understand, so you'll call the realtor tomorrow about increasing the offer. Absolutely, he said, and I smiled, reaching across to squeeze his hand. This was exactly why we worked so well together. Brandon might be a bit rigid sometimes, maybe not the most exciting guy in the world, but he was practical. He understood that I needed to protect myself. The next morning, I was humming while getting ready for work, already mentally decorating our new house when my phone rang. It was Brandon. Hey, babe, did you call Janine about the counteroffer? I asked, balancing the phone between my shoulder and ear while applying mascara. I did. And are we getting the house? There was a pause. Actually, I withdrew our offer. The mascara wand froze halfway to my lashes. You... what? Why... Well, I got to thinking about what you said last night, about being practical, smart planning, so I signed a lease on a 1-bedroom loft instead. A 1-bedroom. What about me? You're keeping your apartment, remember, just in case. I could hear the smugness in his voice, and it made my skin crawl. That's not... where am I supposed to live after the wedding? In your apartment? The one you're keeping? Brandon, that's ridiculous. I'm keeping it as backup. We're supposed to live together. Oh, that's confusing. When you said you were keeping your apartment just in case, I assumed you meant you'd be living there. My mistake. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, fury building in my chest. What the hell was wrong with him? This wasn't what I meant at all, and he knew it. 20 minutes later, I was pounding on his apartment door, still in my work clothes, my hair a mess from running my hands through it during the drive over. We need to talk about this misunderstanding, I announced, pushing past him into his living room. What misunderstanding? I gestured wildly at his space at the boxes he hadn't even finished unpacking yet. The loft, the house, you're being petty. Brandon crossed his arms, and there was something different about his expression. Harder. I'm being practical. You opened my eyes to the statistics. Makes sense to protect myself too. That's not how it works. I keep my place as backup, but we live in our house together. So you'd have a whole empty apartment just sitting there while I pay the full mortgage on a house? That doesn't seem fair. I opened and closed my mouth, trying to find the right words. The mortgage would be both of ours. And would it, because you'd be paying rent on your apartment, unless you expected me to cover the entire house payment while you keep your safety net? The silence stretched between us, and I could feel heat creeping up my neck, because that's exactly what I'd expected. I made decent money at my job, but not house buying money. Not on my own, and definitely not while also paying rent on my apartment. Look, I said finally, this is all some silly misunderstanding. Can't you just buy the house anyway? Why would I buy a house for someone who's already planning for our divorce? Over the next 3 weeks, I tried everything. First, I called his mom, Patricia, who'd always liked me. Brandon's sweetheart, what's this about a bachelor pad? She asked him when I put her up to calling. It's a 1-bedroom loft, Patricia. Very practical. But what about the wedding? Where will you two live? Marissa is keeping her apartment. She was very clear about that. I could hear the confusion in her voice through the phone. I'm sure she didn't mean... She literally said, just in case things don't work out, I'm just being equally practical. When that didn't work, I tried a different approach. I showed up at his place with my laptop and a detailed spreadsheet I'd spent hours perfecting. Look, I said, setting up on his kitchen counter, I've run the numbers. If we split the house payment 60-40, I can still afford my apartment. See, everyone wins. Brandon studied my calculations, and I was proud of how thorough I'd been. I'd even added a line item for my security fund. Basically, him subsidizing my apartment, but I'd made it sound reasonable. Counteroffer, he said, after a long moment. We both keep our separate places. After a year of marriage, if things are good, we look for a house together. A year. I slammed the laptop shut. We're supposed to be newlyweds living in a gorgeous house, not living separately like roommates. Then give up the apartment. I can't. What if something happens? Then I guess we have our answer. My friends tried to help next. Gracie, Shannon, and Brandy cornered Brandon at his gym, which honestly was probably not the best strategy since he looked ridiculous in those tight workout clothes, all sweaty and trying to act tough. We need to talk, Gracie announced, apparently blocking his path to the water fountain. About? You're ruining Marissa's life over nothing, Shannon chimed in. She's just being smart. So am I. No, you're being vindictive, Brandy added. She's crying every night. The wedding venue is booked. Deposits are paid. Just buy the house. Why doesn't she give up the apartment? I heard about this conversation later, and apparently they just looked at each other like he'd asked them to explain quantum physics. Because that's different, Gracie finally said. Women need security. And men don't... You make more money, Shannon accused. Which is why she thinks I should pay most of the mortgage while she keeps her escape hatch. They didn't have an answer for that either, which honestly just proved how unreasonable Brandon was being. Any normal guy would understand that this was just smart planning on my part. 2 months before the wedding, I decided to take control of the narrative. I'd been telling people we were working through some housing logistics, keeping our realtor Janine on standby, just in case Brandon came to his senses. But then he posted that stupid Instagram photo of his loft with the caption, "Love my new place, perfect for the bachelor life." My phone exploded. friends, family, coworkers, everyone wanting to know what was going on. I was fielding calls and texts for hours trying to do damage control while also wanting to strangle Brandon for putting our business out there like that. The worst was when my mom showed up at his door with my sister Shannon in tow, ready for a full intervention. "How dare you?" I screamed the moment he opened the door. "Bachelor life. Are you calling off the wedding?" I haven't called off anything, just being clear about my living situation. Mom tried her calm, reasonable voice. "Brandon, be sensible. Marissa made one small request about keeping her apartment for security. She literally called it insurance for when we split up." That's not what I meant." I could hear how shrill my voice was getting, but I couldn't help it. "Then what did you mean? I wanted security from my future husband." "Oh." Shannon stepped forward using that social worker voice she'd perfected in graduate school. "You're being financially abusive." "How by not buying a house for someone who's planning for our marriage to fail?" "By controlling her with money." Brandon actually laughed. "I'm not controlling anything. She can keep her apartment. I'll keep my loft. Everyone's happy." "That's not a marriage," I shouted. "Married people live together." "Then give up the apartment." You don't understand. What if you leave me? What if you cheat? What if, What if you leave? What if you cheat? Your apartment plan only protects you, not us. And so I actually stamped my foot, which probably didn't help my case, but I was so frustrated I could barely think straight. "That's different. I'm taking all the risk getting married." "How exactly are you taking more risk than me?" "I'm giving up my independence, my freedom, your backup plan." "Yeah, that's the problem." After they left still shouting, I knew I had to do something drastic. The next day I called Janine directly. "Marissa, how are the negotiations going with Brandon?" "We're restructuring our financial arrangement," I said carefully. "Is the house still available?" She laughed. "Well, no, the sellers accepted another offer last week, but here's what I can do. I've got a few other properties that might work. Are you looking to buy solo now?" "Maybe. What kind of down payment would I need?" "For something in that price range, at least 20%. Are you a first-time buyer? There might be some programs, My heart sank. 20% of our dream house was more than I had in savings, especially if I was also keeping my apartment. What about the earnest money Brandon put down on the first house? Could I use that? There was a pause. "Marissa, you'd need to ask Brandon about that. You're not married yet, so technically, it's his money." I hung up, my face burning with embarrassment, but I wasn't done yet. 1 month before the wedding, I made my final play. I sent out updated wedding invitations with our dream house address, the one that was no longer available, but our guests didn't know that. I even created a wedding website with photos from the listing talking about where Brandon and I would start our lives together. The calls started immediately. My mom confused about the address, Brandon's dad asking about the beautiful home, coworkers wanting to know about our house hunting success. I deflected them all, saying we were still finalizing details. Brandon texted me, "You need to tell people the truth about the house." I texted back, "Buy it and it will be the truth." "It's already sold to someone else." "Then buy a different one." "With what down payment you're keeping all your savings for your apartment?" "Finan. Use your savings." "The ones I'm using for my loft and life pass." That night, I showed up at his door with a stack of loan documents. I'd spent the entire day researching calling lenders, finding a solution that would work for both of us. I found the solution, I announced triumphantly, spreading the papers across his coffee table. It was a smaller house in a less desirable neighborhood, but it was still a house. The payment was manageable, and I'd already started the application process to save time. Brandon picked up the top sheet, frowning. You started a loan application in my name. It's perfect. The payment is less than the other house. You can afford it on your own. Marissa, this is fraud. It's not fraud. We're getting married. What's yours is mine, right? We're not married yet, and you're keeping a separate apartment. How is what's mine yours if what's yours isn't mine? Stop twisting things. Just sign the papers. No. I felt something snap inside me. All the weeks of his stubborn refusal to see reason, all the humiliation of having to explain to people why we didn't have a house yet, all the stress of trying to make him understand something so simple. Then I'll tell everyone you're being abusive, that you're trying to make me homeless. You have an apartment? That's not the point. That's exactly the point. I grabbed the papers and headed for the door, but I had to make one last threat. If you don't fix this, the wedding is off. Okay. I froze at the door. Okay, what? Okay, if you need me to buy you a house while you keep your own place to marry me, then we shouldn't get married. You can't call my bluff like that. I just did. 2 weeks before what should have been our wedding day, it was officially over. I tried to spin it as mutual, but Shannon ruined everything with her drunk Facebook post. My sister deserves better than a man who won't even buy her a house. Brandon is trash. She just wanted to keep her apartment for safety, and he turned it into this whole thing. Now she's stuck in her tiny apartment while he lives in his bachelor pad. Men are garbage. The comments were brutal. Apparently, several of my friends had known about my plan all along and had opinions about it. Gracie commented, "Girl, I told you to wait until after the wedding to tell him about keeping the apartment." Shannon added, "Should have just bought the house first, then mentioned it." But the worst was from Brandy. This is why you don't date men who think they deserve equality. Reading those comments, I felt sick. They made it sound like I'd been scheming, like I'd planned to deceive Brandon. That wasn't what this was about at all. I just wanted security. Bray said in, "My dad tried one last intervention, showing up at Brandon's loft with his contractor's swagger and stern father routine. This has gone far enough," he announced. "My little girl is heartbroken." I'm sorry to hear that. You're going to fix this. You're going to buy a house, marry my daughter, and stop this nonsense about her apartment. No, I'm not. Dad's face went red. Excuse me. Your daughter wants me to buy a house while she keeps a backup apartment. That's not a partnership. That's called being smart. You should be proud she's thinking ahead. By planning for our divorce before we're married, by protecting herself while expecting me to take all the financial risk, you know what kind of world we live in? Yeah, I do, which is why I'm protecting myself too. I'd been quiet during this whole exchange, but suddenly I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. I just wanted security. Is that so wrong? Or a moment. No, Brandon said, and for a moment I thought he was finally getting it. But expecting me to provide everything while you keep your exit strategy, that's wrong. Dad stepped closer, trying to intimidate him. Now listen here. Now you listen. Your daughter spent 4 years with me. She knows I'm not abusive, not a cheater, not a bad partner. Yet she still wants divorce insurance. What does that tell you? It tells me she's smart. It tells me she doesn't actually want to marry me. She wants to marry my wallet while keeping her options open. How dare you? I dare because it's true, and deep down you all know it. My tears stopped as suddenly as they'd started. He wanted the truth. Fine. Yes, I wanted security. Yes, I wanted to make sure I'd be okay if things went wrong, because that's what smart women do. Great. And what do smart men do? They provide for their partners, not for people already planning their exit. 3 months later, on what would have been our wedding day, I was sitting in my apartment, my expensive security apartment that I could barely afford, on my own salary. I'd had to get a roommate, some girl from Craigslist who had a boyfriend that practically lived here rent-free. So much for my space and independence. I got a series of texts from people who'd seen Brandon's latest Instagram post, him and some woman from his cycling group at a coffee shop looking disgustingly happy together. She wasn't even that pretty, honestly. Kind of plain, if you asked me. But there they were all coupled up while I was stuck explaining to people why I needed help with rent. The apartment that was supposed to be my security blanket had become my prison. Brandon had moved on, gotten his justice or whatever, and I was left dealing with the aftermath of his petty revenge. My dad wouldn't help with money because he said I should have just married Brandon. My friends were tired of hearing about it. And every month when rent was due, I was reminded of how this whole thing had backfired. But you know what? I still think I was right. Marriage is a risk, and women need to protect themselves. Brandon just couldn't handle being with a smart, independent woman who wasn't going to be naive about the realities of modern relationships. He got his bachelor pad and his new girlfriend. I got exactly what I asked for. My apartment, just in case. Funny how that worked out.